Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome back to the show. My guest today is Louise Hart. Louise has had a long career in railways after being a lawyer originally, a career in railways in the UK and in Australia for over 30 years. She was involved in many very large projects, so-called mega projects, and she is specifically specialized in governance and procurement. She has written an international bestseller which is titled Procuring Successful Mega Projects, a very recommendable book that has recently been published in a paperback version, which is much more affordable. You will find a link in the show notes. This interview will be broadcast in 3 parts to make the episodes a bit shorter and hopefully more digestible to you. So please enjoy this part number 1 of my conversation with Louise Hart. Before that, quick word from our sponsor, which is myself, and please listen to it because it may save you some money. Enjoy. Hi, this is Doc Frank, and before we get into the podcast, I want to quickly tell you about ONO, O-N-O. In case you don't know what it means, here in Australia it means or nearest offer, and that means that a price for a certain thing is negotiable. So how does it work and how may that be of interest to you? If you're interested in training or education on advanced modern signaling or the capacity increase of railways, then please do step 1 up here and check out my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com. You will find a globally unique collection of training offers that you can't find anywhere else. If you do, let me know. I'm always happy to learn. There are courses about the blueprint for high capacity signaling, the mindset for high capacity railways, and of course the flagship CBTC training that has been the longest running CBTC training in the world, even though it's been regularly updated. If you have found anything that's of interest to you, then we come to step number 2. You look at the regular price. If you think that's fair, that's good, then just procure the training and enjoy. I'm happy with that. If you want to save a few bucks, then send me an email to training@docfrank.com.au. And in that email, let me know which training or conference recording you are interested in and what is the price that you want to pay for it. And if I consider your offer reasonable, if it makes sense for me, I will accept it. Otherwise, I will let you know, and maybe we have a little negotiation along the way as well. And then you have the opportunity to enjoy world-class training on signaling at prices that are below the nominal package. So I think it's a good offer. It won't last forever. The current intent is to keep it running to the end of this calendar year, 2024. So don't wait to the last minute. Check out my training portal. And if you find something, then send me an email and let's negotiate. But now, please enjoy the upcoming podcast episode. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Frank. Nice to be here.
It's been quite a while since we met. We once worked together on a business case review in Sydney for the rollout of ETCS Level 2. So I was brought in there as the subject matter expert for ETCS, and you were brought in as the subject matter expert for, I think, predominantly procurement, but also project management. So why don't we start with you giving a little bit on your background so that listeners understand a bit better what you've done in the past and where your expertise sits.
Sure. Well, I started out as a lawyer. I had nothing to do with railways at the start of my career, but I worked in Sydney and London with a couple of major firms. But in 1995, the UK government decided to privatise Railtrack, and I went in originally to write the prospectus. But when the float was completed, I stayed on in management and got involved in a number of big transactions that they were doing. And then they went bust in due course. And I moved back to Sydney and joined Railcorp, the predecessor to Sydney Trains, originally to do the Waratah procurement. That's the trains on the Sydney network. Bought 672 carriages worth, and then stayed on with them until 2014, when I decided to go out on my own, which is what I do now, general advice on infrastructure and procurement.
Okay. So what I noted, or how I knew you even before I actually met you on that business case review, which excited me very much, was that you were a book author at the time. You have written a book on procurement, which I've got here in front of me, with the title of Procuring Successful Mega Projects. I put a link to this in the show notes, and then now I take it out of my face. I mean, given your background, it explains why or how you came to write a book about procurement, and especially your legal background as a lawyer also explains the subtitle, How to Establish Major Government Contracts Without Ending Up in Court. So do you want to take your profession out of business, or what was the real background to that?
Look, I think I just got fed up of seeing so many stupid things happen on big projects. We have a lot of science now around how to do project management, how to do procurement, what you need to do, and there's all sorts of guidance about this and guidance about that. And people keep doing really stupid things. And I just thought, some of it is because they just don't know what's been tried before and failed, and what happens if you do some of the things you're not supposed to do. And so I thought, I've got a lot of knowledge on this. I'm going to sit down and try and it's a classic lessons learned exercise, really, but done in book length. And I was actually very chuffed. I wrote it about 10 years ago, but it's held up very well in terms of what is correct in it. There's a few things around the technology which have moved on, but the principles really don't change. And the publisher has just brought out a paperback edition of it. So I'm really quite chuffed by that. It's also quite a bit cheaper for anyone out there who wants to buy
it. I will make sure that I put the paperback version in the show notes as well. I think one of the reasons that this may be so popular is that there aren't really that many books out there on the topic of procurement. So there are things out there on the management of mega projects. I recently did a podcast interview where we discussed a book by Professor Fleifberg, who is very much specialized in the management of mega projects and what can go wrong and how you can do it better and so on. But with specific emphasis of procurement, there isn't really too much out there. And I read through the book and I found there were many very practical tips and tricks that seem almost obvious, or many of them seem obvious. But then again, if you haven't done it before, or if you haven't done it in such a huge context, or you've got influencing factors, all kinds of things, then things may just go sideways. I was smiling about your use of the word stupid, because I did use it myself for a while. I did some lessons learned stuff in one of my assignments, actually on the same project that we previously reviewed the business case on. And for a while, I would have described my role as a consultant in helping the client avoiding stupid mistakes. And then I thought, yeah, that may sound a bit like talking down on a client, like they behave stupid or something like that. So maybe rather than stupid mistakes, it would be like avoidable mistakes or something like that. And then I saw you using the word stupid as well, and I just had to smile because apparently we both came to kind of the same conclusions. So did you ever get any pushback regarding the word stupid, or do people just accept that some of the mistakes that could have been avoided were really stupid in hindsight?
Yeah, look, I think the thing is, the most stupid mistakes tend to be made by the really intelligent people. That it's so easy on one of these big projects where everything's coming at you from all directions, and it's so easy to just latch on to an apparently simple solution without taking the time to think it through, and realize that, you know, no, that's illegal in the worst case, or, no, it'll work now, but it'll give us problems down the track. One of the classics, intercity West Coast franchising case, where they did end up in court because of using a financial model which wasn't fit for purpose. And the daft thing was that they actually held a meeting and said, if we disclose this model to the bidders, they will challenge it. So let's not disclose it. When the correct answer was, if we disclose this model, they will challenge it. Let's use a model which is not capable of being challenged. And it's those. In hindsight, it is so obvious, but I can well see how in the heat of the moment, you've put all of this effort into creating this financial model. Instead of thinking, actually, it isn't fit for purpose, you think, well, let's not tell people and they will never find out. And, you know,
Sure enough, they
as
did
I say, in
find out.
hindsight, so obvious.
Yeah, yeah. That's probably always the problem, or at least often the problem with not telling the truth, or just hiding some stuff away that eventually it may just pop up to the surface. Yeah. So yeah, it's better to be transparent, to be straightforward. But ideally, as you said before, ideally you realize that this model is not as bulletproof as it should be. So better to come up with something that's more bulletproof, or can be less challenged.
Yeah, I think so. And there is also an element of tension with the lawyers and compliance people who are concerned to come up with something that's bulletproof. But from, the project people point of view, it's no good to you if it's bulletproof if you end up with a contractor who's useless and can't do the job. The fact that the procurement may have been absolutely immaculate, is no help if you then end up with someone who can't do the job. So you've always got that tension to manage. You want to end up with the best contractor, but you need to do it in a way that won't compromise the procurement process.
Yeah, and that's probably where the evaluation criteria come in. So I've seen cases where the railway basically shot themselves in the foot by setting up procurement criteria or evaluation criteria that forced them towards choosing a solution that they didn't really want, simply because they had to according to their own evaluation criteria. So if you, for example, a very simple example, if you have price as your criteria number one, so that you basically have to use the lowest bidder, as long as they are not very obviously useless, like, or non-compliant with some generic sanitizing requirements in the tender process or so, you may not necessarily end up with the best and most capable bidder or contractor. Yeah.
Mm. I always tell people with publishing the evaluation criteria, which you do now for the bidders in the request for tenders, is that you should always plan how you're going to do the evaluation before you finalize the criteria. Because it's surprisingly easy to come up with a criterion that actually it's really difficult to evaluate, or it will come up with the wrong answer. And that's particularly true if you've. I came across this in a railway context where for years in New South Wales, there was a choice of only two, in essence, for buying trains. And that meant that the criteria which people were accustomed to use were essentially designed to help you choose between whichever one of these two bidders was doing the best job on the day. And then suddenly you get third and fourth bidders turning up internationally, and your criteria, which will distinguish these two, don't necessarily give you a good choice between the new bidders and the old. And it's you actually need to understand the market and the likely bidders to appreciate how your evaluation criteria are going to play out in the methodology you use.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I had an experience once where exactly that was confirmed, where one of the established rolling stock providers in Australia was planning to import a train from overseas, and then basically explained to the client that they plan to Australianize that train, like importing it,
Mm.
but then making it suitable for the Australian circumstances. And the client just looked us straight in the eye and said, and this is exactly what I don't want you to do. Yeah, because what they wanted was a proven product from overseas for an application, for a train application in Australia, that was a first in Australia, which wasn't done before.
Mm.
And it's probably not very hard to guess what that possibly could have been. I was obviously talking about Sydney Metro, which was the first metro system in Australia. So nobody in Australia at that time had ever done a metro train before. And
Mm.
the typical trains in Australia were these suburban train sets, which were usually very, very heavy, extremely robust, withstanding even collisions without too much damage. Well, I mean, you always have damage in train collisions anyway,
Mm.
but the way to build trains in Australia at the time was very, very very solid. Yeah, to say the least. But very solid at the same time also means very heavy, probably not too energy efficient, things like that. And yeah, and the client said, well, this is a metro, so we want a metro train that has been proven in another metro overseas, without any modifications or local adaptations into something that may be less suitable than we think the original was from overseas.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
the urge to do something customized is an absolute killer for getting value for money. Sometimes you have to, but so often you really don't.
yes. Yeah, because very often customization means, especially for if you introduce something new, and I see this in my area of expertise in the signaling field as well, that um, you introduce something which you haven't used before in Australia, and you, by customizing it, you're basically inferring that you can improve a product that has already been optimized elsewhere. And yeah, so implicitly you're basically saying, well, we are smarter than the rest of the world. So we come up with something that's only applicable here. Nobody else in the world ever needed that, but we think we need this definitely, and that's our way of making this special or making it better. And what it ends up being is definitely more expensive, and also more risky in terms of implementation, development cost, and safety cases to need to be redone, all kinds of things. Yeah, and obviously any change, especially in software-driven system, has a huge risk of things going wrong, and yeah, that's what usually happens. So I'm not a fan of customization either. Yeah, especially not bespoke things. That nobody else in the world ever thought they need.
Yeah. It's okay to change the color of the seats, though. I'm okay with that.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this conversation with Louise Hart. If you think this is good, then please recommend it to a friend, and make sure you also listen to the upcoming parts 2 and part 3. The easiest way to do this is by subscribing to the show. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.